Carla, Hillary, Glenn, Gino. Others? We could also start like this if folks aren't ready. So what is this? Serene, Chloe. Serene, Chloe. And then why don't we get started with this? And if you want to add your name, I'm happy to put it, okay? So I'm going to remove myself for now just because I feel like I'm going to do some coordination. Maybe we can start with Glenn. Glenn, you choose either way, okay? Like you pick where you want to go. I'm going to mute because I'm going to do some administrative stuff on the side. But again, the middle prompt is just it. It's very open-ended, so define as you see fit. But also know that you have to share airtime here, right, with other folks. And we're also encouraging people to come in. So with that, take it away.
So sorry, Monica, just to clarify, you want me to just speak on the prompt in the middle and then I can go either way?
Yeah, so if you want to do it at a personal level, if you want to think about it more broadly, like connect how you will, because today is about student leadership. Yeah, you know the course content, right? But at the end of the day, it's about student leadership and how do we do stuff, right? How do we feel equipped and empowered to do stuff, whatever that stuff is? I'm hoping some folks can talk about community work, some folks can talk about scholarly work. Other folks might just talk about intervening in like personal relationships and interpersonal relationships. I don't really like, I'm open to what gets put down. So basically that's that. Go ahead.
Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Thank you for sharing your space with me again. Student leadership to me, I think when Monica was speaking, what first came into my thought that sometimes it's heartbreaking that you put so much work and so much of your passion and who you are into something. And sometimes you find yourselves into networks that don't share those values or your ideas, but also because you cared so much, it's just like, like to me, I put all my effort and passion into it because it is what I love. And sometimes it was just about, at the end of the day, it's about what I loved. And it is not, oh my God. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Some of the technical difficulties. Anyways, yeah, but also it's very fulfilling. I think it's a really duality in which that you have to be aware that it's not always this fire and like, you know, all these things that you can do, because you can do a lot of things, but there's also this flip side on a heartbreak because everyone is different, and so you can't always find the people that will support, like that will always be in your same wavelength. But what is being helpful to me is finding this community of care. And they are here in this thing, in the Zoom too, like Monica, Gino, Carla, and Hillary. They're the ones that also help me move forward beyond the heartbreak, because you can only just build up from there, right? Like there is this heartbreak that strengthens you and pushes you forward. So I think to me, that's the thing that I thought about at first, is just it's heartbreaking, but it's also fulfilling, and you have to find that community of care that will propel you forward as always in life. So yeah, that's from me. What do I say? Like, do I point someone out or do I go left or right? I don't know. Hillary?
Tino's name is right there. I agree with like Glenn with the whole like heartbreak thing, but I also want to kind of steer the boat, I guess, in the direction of like your work as a student or your work as a student activist. In my undergrad years, I was very passionate about the Filipino Student Association. And like what Glenn said, there was heartbreak in that, but also you feel fulfilled. In the courses that I took, especially in my third and fourth year, they were not open to like, or not, I wouldn't say not open, but like there wasn't a lot of structure to talk about what I'm interested in, which was for like Filipino studies. So I guess where I'm trying to get with this is that part of your work or like part of the work of a student activist is implementing and being subversive in your work as an academic, finding out ways to share your like stories and histories and perspectives through the work that is in a syllabus that is so outlined weekly and stuff like that. That takes emotional labor on top of like physical labor of writing out your paper and whatever. I just want to show like one example that I did. Like I was in a class with Glenn. It was mass incarceration in the U.S. That was the main. That was the subject. That was the class. But I found ways to talk about like the like imperial history of the Philippines in that class, and also what are the legacies of it up until today. So like just, I guess that's where I'm trying to get at, is that there is so much more labor, so much more heartbreaking and difficult labor when it comes to like student activist work, and specifically in your work as an academic. I'd like to pass it to Carla. I'm just gonna follow the flow here. Carla, hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Carla. Thanks for having me here, and for Glenn and Hillary sharing so much about like that personal connection to doing community work. Like I think you two really spoke to the range of how amazing it is and fulfilling and life-changing, but then also you will be disappointed, and also there will be moments where you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? I can't see the point of this, and what it takes to like reground yourself, to remind yourself what is the purpose of all of that. I haven't been a student for a couple of years, so because kind of some of what I was thinking about when Monica showed the that scale of like where are you going to be on your engagement is stuff that I'm having to navigate and learn as not a student, but actively choosing to be in community. Like when you're an adult that is no longer a student, at least for me, like there's so many things that are going to take up your time, and so many things that are going to become priorities that it feels like I don't have time to be an activist. I don't have time or energy to put towards this. And so then, and thinking about how to balance that. And I think what I'll talk about is in my work. So I work at a social service agency in downtown Toronto, and it's not a Filipino serving agency exclusively. It's an agency that serves folks who experience homelessness and mental health and addiction challenges. And how can I'm constantly having to think about, how do I bring in my Filipino-ness, and how do I look at the population engagement is stuff that I'm having to navigate and learn as not a student, but actively choosing to be in community. Like when you're an adult that is no longer a student, at least for me, like there's so many things that are going to take up your time, and so many things that are going to become priorities that it feels like I don't have time to be an activist. I don't have time or energy to put towards this. And so then, and thinking about how to balance that. And I think what I'll talk about is in my work. So I work at a social service agency in downtown Toronto, and it's not a Filipino serving agency exclusively. It's an agency that serves folks who experience homelessness and mental health and addiction challenges. And how can I'm constantly having to think about, how do I bring in my Filipino-ness, and how do I look at the population that we're serving and try to advocate for the Southeast Asian and Filipino population that an overwhelmingly white nonprofit management team doesn't see as like being too different from the majority of who they're serving. So I think what I'm trying to say is that like outside of like when you're no longer a student and you're navigating these workplaces, and to be an activist within the workplace can be like challenging to your own identity. It can be kind of the things that Glenn and Hillary were speaking to. And there's this delicate balance of, well, I have to have this job and I have to do this and I can't alienate other people, but I also know that this is right. And I know that we need to have some systemic changes. And it's not easy. It's not easy. So I'll pass it on to Chloe.
Thanks so much. All of you guys have given me like a lot to think about. And so I'm still just kind of like, this might just be like a word vomit of not like fully fleshed ideas, but it's just like this, all of this is like giving me a lot to think about in terms of like throughout my education, kind of like even from high school, like I was very involved like in the community, let's say like the newspaper, like all these different like organizations to try to like foster a sense of community in a predominantly like white, like upper middle class, like private all girls school environment, you know, with like only a handful of racialized students. And then, so like having a lot of kind of support amongst the teaching staff. I think a lot of teachers like supported me and like the other students who were involved in like the community work. So like from there, I was like really kind of like avid in terms of like involvement and stuff. And so going into like CJEP and like first year of university, I was very involved like continuously within the community, showing up to like almost every event type of thing, you know, like just trying to like find those interesting conversations and those communities. I guess coming from like a mixed background, like my mom is Chinese, so I grew up within like a Chinese Montreal community, Chinese Vancouver community, but also like all of my education has been predominantly white and like all of my friends predominantly white. And so like kind of like a strange in-betweenness that I've always kind of experienced. And so like trying to figure out how to bring those two together has always like been super emotionally draining. And I think that's where all the community involvement came in. And so, yeah, I think I reached a moment in like my first year of undergrad where I was just like totally burnt out. I think I had to take eventually like a semester off and like regroup, because I like first year I was taking like econ, like international development, all these courses, and I was just like, oh my God, like I'm like surrounded by a bunch of white kids and like no one is like actually caring about like what they're talking about. We're just like talking about all of these problems, but no like solutions or like no like tangible ways to engage, which like always kind of frustrated me. But then I think like I had to take a step back and just kind of like regroup and try to like figure out what communities and what kind of work I wanted to do. So in my like second and third year, that's where I started to like you guys kind of said, like chose like kind of honed in on what I wanted to study within the institution. And I was like, okay, you know, like I'm just gonna take the courses that I need to, but like do my own thing. So I started like just studying like Chinese, like, or like I wanted to study my grandfather's like experience in immigration and like Chinese opera. And so like that became like my research project in almost every class. And like in anthropology, like all the kids knew me as like the Chinese opera, like Cantonese opera girl, because that was just like like I kept trying to like explore those topics in like any class, like, and frame it differently. And then I started meeting people like and building kind of my own community of people who could like relate, or like last class I was talking about a good friend of mine now, Kondo, who's from the Tibetan Students for Free Tibet, and like she's also in anthropology, and so you kind of start to like, or like communities begin to attract each other, you know, in terms of what kind of engagements you're doing, and what kind of work, or like what you're rejecting and what you want to do, or what you want to do in anthropology. So I think there's been a move like for me in terms of like, yes, I'm still in my discipline, but like just like actively choosing to reject certain things and then just do my own thing, and like not do too much, but just do what I want to do, and then like kind of foster my own community and build relationships with people that like I would want to engage with in the future, you know, and like uphold each other. So I think that has been like a super big turning point in terms of my undergrad. Finding my homies, yeah. I'll pass it to Serene.
Hi. Thank you everyone for sharing. I really related to Chloe's point a lot, actually, about like this kind of journey in my undergraduate degree, to really carve out space within my own discipline to study what I want. And it really has not been easy. And I think that's like something that when I think about student as leaders, like I just wrote down a bunch of thoughts, but like I think back to like, I guess I think back to our readings. I think back to Le Paper Son. I think back to like how students as leaders, I feel like is sometimes a contradictory like phrase, because I feel like we're taught not to be leaders. We're taught to follow a certain mold. We're taught to not speak up, because every time we do speak up in class, you know, especially if it's about race or if it's about personal experience, you do feel like a great amount of shame in the way that the way people react. And so those types of feelings discourage you to be a leader. So I'm thinking back to like, I guess like being a cyborg and how I relate to that experience, because I very much have felt that in my department, in the Department of History. And I guess I'm just thinking about how I guess like empowering ourselves to intervene for me very much has been like empowering myself to intervene in my own like journey, in my own discipline. Like how can I speak up for myself when I feel like nobody is listening, and like how do I find that community? And I feel like it's interesting because when you talked about, you know, like finding your people, Chloe, like I feel like that happened when I made the conscious decision not to compromise anymore. I was like, I don't care if you're going to give me a bad grade because I want to write about this. I actually would rather get a worse grade and write about what I want, even if it's not your specialty, because apparently there's no one of my specialty in this discipline and I'm tired of waiting. And so like putting down my foot and being like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And I like don't really give a shit if you don't like it. And I feel like once I started doing that, like the community came with that. Like people like saw me doing that, and like that attracted a certain kind of energy. And, you know, it was kind of a snowball effect. Like me being unapologetic attracted other unapologetic people. And that's kind of when I started doing, you know, like PAC stuff, like Pan Asian Collective, just making more Asian friends on campus. Because, and it's interesting too, because as a mixed race person, I think I have such a different experience, because when people see me, I don't know if they know that I'm like what I am. So even in like the past like 4 years at McGill, like going into McGill being like a super like, yeah, like I was taught like girl boss feminism in high school. And so that's kind of what I projected. And then I kind of attracted that energy. And I was like, oh my God, this is not what I want. And I had people saying racist things to me, thinking that I would agree with them. And then after, you know, second year or end of first year, second year, you know, really like reclaiming what I wanted to do and being like, no, this is who I am. This is my identity, and speaking openly about it. The same people that would speak to me about their opinions about things kind of shifted. And those were the people approaching me to kind of like really want to share with me how they weren't racist. And I would be like, okay, like that's enough. So just like seeing like the way that people treat me too and how that's changed. And even with professors, I see that like changing the way they speak to me because I'm no longer afraid to speak up to them. And I think that's kind of daunting for some of them. And it's kind of empowering to me. So yeah, and just really quickly before I end, I know I've spoken for quite a bit now, but I'm just also thinking back to, I think like one of the first classes that Monica taught, where she talks about the urgency of now in context of the Black scholar, like the scholar strike in Canada, and like what the Black Faculty Caucus at McGill was doing. And I remember like that phrase just really sticking in my head. And I've been thinking about it all this semester. And I've been thinking about how the urgency of now must come also with the urgency of rest. And I feel like that's something that I've been thinking about in terms of like empowering myself to intervene, is also like trusting my community to step in when I know like I'm too tired, I'm too exhausted, I don't have any spoons left, you know, that the community that I share that uplifts me, like it's reciprocal. Like I will step in when someone else steps down, and that's something I have to trust. And so being a student leader, I suppose, like students as leaders, like we have to have each other's back. And so that's been something I've been thinking about as well. I'm not sure who we're passing it back to. I think, is it Gino? Is Gino after me? Yeah, okay, sweet, awesome.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I can go next. Thank you. First, thanks, Monica, for inviting us. I guess like a quick history, like how I know Monica. I've only been in Canada for 5 years now. I moved here in 2015. I started high school. I was actually in my grade 11, and moving to Canada, I always had these like pre-existing thoughts about how perfect like the life's gonna be. But coming here was not like that was not reality. So leadership for me was a form of like self-exploration, coming to terms with my identity, as well as giving back to my community. And in terms of our topic today, in terms of like empowering ourselves to intervene, one examples that I can think of in my leadership experience was when I was in high school. When I started high school here, my high school was predominantly, Filipino populated, a lot of newcomers and all of that, but the student council wasn't really reflective of that. Most students were Canadian born or been here most of their lives. And, I think what inspired me to take action was that I wanted my community to be represented, and kind of like inspire these students to take space and kind of like if they can do it, so can you. And it's really and I guess everything sprouted from there, because I was involved in some real leadership camps where I met Monica brought me to amazing places. We've been to Hawaii together. Within a year of knowing each other, we've been to Vancouver. It's also like a form of like giving back to the community, where I like understand my privileges, because I know that some people might be too afraid to speak up, and I'm not there to kind of like speak up for them, but at the same time kind of just like give them an example that like be an influence for them to kind of like take space and be inspiring. And I don't know where I was gonna go with my talk, but like leadership for me is very, very important, because it's very contradicting with my like program too in school. I'm studying biology at Ryerson, but I really do like to always incorporate leadership in all of my work, because it's given me so much opportunity that I want these other people to kind of like I guess encourage them to speak up, take space, and kind of feel like seen, because we don't really see a lot of newcomers who take space and take leadership positions. So yeah, so let me nominate Brianna to share.
Hey y'all. I wasn't originally gonna speak because I'm really tired, like that's a surprise. That's kind of how I am all the time now. But Serene said something that I was super inspired by, so I kind of wanted to comment on it, where she was talking about like taking agency in what she studies and how that like created this big shift in her life. And it just resonated with me so much because when I started doing that, I feel like in my second year, I thought like I was kind of alone in this process, and it's like really incredibly tiring. Like like for example, I just remember in my second year, I would like wait outside of prof's office hours and like basically be like, hey, I know you don't actually study this, but like please supervise this independent study, or all these different like just like acts of labor you have to do for yourself. um and I'm just basically mimicking everything Serene said, but that thing about like when you kind of put agency into your own words and you assert yourself and you have like confidence behind it. Like a lot of times I feel like it's false confidence. Like I walk into a room and like hype myself up, but like I actually don't know what I'm actually saying. Like behind the words, I'm like, what am I doing here? And like you can see how people treat you differently all of a sudden, and they're like, oh, um like there's just like a difference in the way people act towards you, and like you're no longer not an agent of yourself. And I feel like applying that to like activist or like student activist work, right? I feel like it's the same thing. Like a lot of times student activist organizations aren't taken super seriously until there's like one confident voice in the room. um and so yeah, that's all I basically had to say. I just felt like that what you said, Serene, resonated with me so much. So I just want to say that. Oh, I should pass it to, oh god. Has Anne spoken? No? Okay, Anne.
Sure. Hi y'all. I feel like I'm kind of like at a weird point where I'm like kind of like on a cusp of like wanting to like branch out and like be a like more active member of the community. And just to preface, I'm from Fort Bend in Texas, which is like one of the most like diverse counties in the US. And so when I lived there, I like was very much like perceived as like being white, despite the fact that I'm like mixed, because all of my friends were like also like ethnic minorities. And so when I came to McGill, I like realized very quickly that like I wasn't being perceived the same way, and it was like such like a shock. And like I hadn't really, like up to the point of like being in this class, I hadn't really found like a community of like people who like really looked like me or anything. Like I found out about PAC like through this class as well. And like kind of like how Chloe was saying, like I was really involved like in high school as well. Like I would stay like after school for like hours, and like I was so involved in like volunteering and everything. And when I got to college, I was not only burnt out, but I also just really wanted to find um a space and like something that like actually motivated me. And like to, if I were to be in like a student position or like a leadership position, I wanted it to come from a place of like I actually want to do this, and like have that be my motivation, instead of it being like, you know, like, oh, I'm doing this because it'll look good on paper, or like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like that's like the vibe I get from a lot of like organizations at McGill, like all of these like um and so I feel like I'm kind of at a point where like I haven't like really gotten involved yet. Like I'm still like trying to like get everything together to like know like how I want to like make an impact and like what hill I want to die on, I guess. But hearing from all of y'all is definitely very inspiring.
Thanks, Anne. I'll go next just to help things return to another round. Okay, so if folks want to join, let me know so I can write your name in. But if you don't, then we know the people we're working with. So thanks everyone for sharing so far. And I want to build on what Anne has shared as someone who's probably not, right, and really communicating that, not totally involved yet. There's a lot of people in the room with different kinds of experiences, and I wonder if we can do a go around, or you don't have to go in the same kind of order, but you can also pass across, right? Whatever you want to do. But I'm thinking about tangible strategies at different stages, right? So yeah, Hillary, if you want to stay in the circle, stay here. Like I'll keep you in this configuration. Oh, go ahead.
I just have to leave for work in like
Yeah.
2 minutes, but I wanted to share like, hi, Angelo. Hi. I just wanted to share like one last thought.
Go ahead.
Chloe mentioned that her educators like inspired her and motivated her to like keep pursuing and keep being a student leader. And I just want to say, yes, like our role models on like our role models as like or like role models as in like educators or like someone in the higher ups are important, yes, to motivate you, but also you are a role model to your peers. And I think sometimes that we forget that because we're so lost in the sauce, you know, like you're stressed doing so much stuff, like Glenn, Gino, Carla, Monica have inspired me in so many ways in my work, in the community, also in my work as a student, in my work as an educator in the making, and just being like a well-rounded individual, just being a kind individual. They have taught me so much. And I think that we, in our self-reflections, when we do that, we also have to recognize like our strengths. And I guess that's my like last little point and like on the topic of empowerment. And just remember that you are ancestors in the making, and you have so much power right now as a student leader, as a student period, and as a human being. I know we're young, but we're leaving a legacy already. And I'm late for work. My apologies. Sorry. Bye. Thank you for the space.
All good, all good. So now I'm responding a little bit to Anne and Hillary, right? So Hillary is off to a paid job. I'm very much into this kind of community organizing work in a paid context. I could never do it volunteer forever and ever. So like this is a reality, I think, that I'm trying to also model for other folks. The thing that I want to put down before it goes off into the other folks, right? Before I pass it off. Like I'm wearing this thing that looks like a doily, right? But like you can see that it's hand sewed in terms of like, it definitely is cut up, but it's like part of a uniform that the aunties would do, like when they're doing performances. And I get, instead of inheriting Laurentian cottages, I inherit like textiles, really, right? So I just wanted to show you a couple of things. I'm going to wear this for in 1 week's time for our performance, our last class. This will be like this thing that I tie. Carla, you might remember this from Pistahan. I wore this outfit, okay? You have to like tie it on the side. So, I don't know if you remember. So we were doing like a table, like a tent, what do you call it? A booth at this Filipino festival that we had split across a couple of us educators. So Carla and I were promoting Pinay Power 2, right? Like this is before it was even, this was just the early idea. And I was a board member of the organization running this festival. Okay, the youngest board member, dressed up, and then for some sort of photo op, right, politically with this board at this festival. And these colleagues of mine, aunts and uncles, titas and titos, completely did not bring me over. And then later, after the fact that, oh, you didn't come for like our photo op and all the welcome, like you didn't include me. So I'm gonna wear that outfit again, also to kind of harken back, right? You can show up prepared already and also be super silenced or even omitted from a group. So I wanna kind of harken back to this notion of empowerment, even in oppressive circles, right? So thinking about skills, strategies, or approaches that might help like remind ourselves as we share in this last go around. So I pass it to Carla.
I actually don't remember that happening. But that's terrible. That's so terrible. And I think that that's a like reflection of like the crab mentality that exists in our community. And I like just listening to a lot of what folks are talking about, like finding your people and finding your community and finding your purpose. Like that's so important. That's super, super important. And I think I just want to like reinforce that piece around you're not just finding people who look like you, but you're finding people who believe in what you believe in, who want to do it the way that you do, who have the same like values and ethics. That you do, because that's so important, and it kind of speaks to those like what the story Monica just shared around like intergenerational challenges that we'll continue to have as younger folks at these community gatherings. I think one thing that I'll share is there was a Filipino Heritage Month gathering of community leaders across the city, and at the time I was the chair, the board chair of a Filipino youth arts agency here. And so I went, and it was a table full of titas and titos, aunties and uncles. And at one point, the chairman, who is very respected, and I hold a lot of respect for these elders because they have carved out space in our communities, but they also kind of have blind spots sometimes to the ageism that they're reinforcing. And the chairman went on for probably about 20 minutes about how they didn't think youth were engaged, and I kept trying to say, I'm here, I want to be able to share what like our agency does and what we want, but they just kept talking over me. So I think it's just this reminder of in those kinds of spaces, or you might find these spaces where you have your people and you have your community, and then you might get sent out to a space where you have to represent, and that group of people is going to that might present some challenges. So I think just like having to ask myself in that moment, okay, is this worth it? Like, what are some strategies that I can think of in order to kind of build trust and create dialogue intergenerationally without compromising who I am and without giving up my strength and my voice? And sometimes it ends up becoming a game of performance and kind of feeding a little bit into what different audiences are expecting from us, but never forgetting what values and ethics and what core things that you care about. Yeah, it's all a performance. Okay, I don't know, somebody just volunteer, or I'm gonna throw it to Serene across the circle.
Hello. Oh my goodness, I have so many thoughts about this conversation that we're having, especially just because, and I just relate so much to what you said about like being so involved in high school and then coming to McGill and then feeling like, okay, I have to be more selective, I'm burnt out. I feel like that can be such like a daunting stage because you feel so much urgency connect to your community, but you also have to, you're thinking about how to reconnect, and you want to do it in a good way for yourself and for your community. And I feel like I just wanted to share some of my own experiences at McGill, because I think, I mean, I talk to Bree about this like all the time, but like even like when I was in my first and second year, I feel like I was unlearning a lot of white feminism for sure, and just like trying to like find spaces where I could like unlearn those was actually just like was really uninviting. Like it was really scary because I feel like I didn't know the terminology, like I didn't know how to speak to these people. I so badly wanted to be part of this kind of like flourishing community that I saw, and I saw these people and I was like, I relate to these people, I'm just not there yet. Like, how do I get there? And I remember just like constantly, especially in first year, just like being pointed out as like the white straight ally to these folks and just being like, oh my God, like that is so hurtful, but like they don't know that. And like, how do I go past that point? Like, how can I, but also like not wanting to take up space. So I feel like for me, like a lot of that was just like trusting the process and like understanding that it was going to be really slow, but that things were going to start changing as soon as I started changing the things that I was talking about and the people that I was friends with. But like, I guess for me, like the biggest thing about like being on that cusp was like allowing for time, like being like, these things are going to change over time and I have to trust myself and like kind of like also like soothe myself in those experiences because I think they were really alienating. But like find those people that I can like have those conversations with. But yeah, just allowing for lots of time. That's just something that I wanted to share with folks. But I don't know like how related that was. I hope it was relevant. Caitlin, do you want to go next?
Hi, I see that there is like only 1 minute left of class formally, so I'll try to keep this a bit short, but if people have to go, of course, go. I'm just gonna quickly write what I was gonna say in the chat as well, so that it's a bit easier to follow. But I was gonna like quote, this like YouTube video about it was like a review of Mulan, like the recent Mulan 2020 movie, and it was by a Chinese social scientist. He's Chinese American, by the way, and he grew up in the U.S. And he kind of says at one point in the video, he says, being a Chinese person raised in the U.S. with my family, I was taught to be humble, meek, quiet, and speak up when it really mattered. And when you work with a bunch of Americans who love to talk anyways, I think he was being a bit cheeky there. Well, leadership in America is perceived to include a lot of talking and being extroverted. Yeah, the visual still up. Yeah, but leadership in China is perceived to be quite introverted, right? And I think relating to this prompt, students as leaders, it's kind of important to remember the different kinds of leadership there is. And it really made me think about how maybe not only my form of leadership or other Asian identifying individuals or even like non-Asians who are just quieter in their leadership, to put it frankly.
Caitlin, do you mean to mute? I'm not totally sure if that was mid-conversation, mid-point, or you're done.
It said the host muted everybody.
Oh, I didn't press that. Okay, go ahead if you can continue. Sorry about that.
Oh, I was just gonna say that even like for everybody, basically, like Asians and non-Asians, it's a really important way to discuss what kind of leadership is effective or what kind of leadership people are most comfortable with. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. There was not really much substance there, but I thought it'd be cool to kind of like show that little excerpt. And then the other YouTube comment or YouTube quote that I had was from a video from Domix. And he is like, I don't know if anyone watches his YouTube channel, but he's a Filipino-Canadian / Filipino-American from Toronto. And he said a really interesting thing in his YouTube video about ambition, and really resonated with me. He was kind of like, so I understood my parents' concern when I came home with a bad grade on a test, and they were probably just like, shit, did we come all the way here for nothing? And I kind of, that always stays in the back of my head when I'm trying to be a leader. And I think maybe a lot of other people might resonate with that, where I don't want to be too outspoken. I don't want to take up space, but does that mean I'm being a bad leader? Am I being a better leader by doing that? So yeah, that was my like two cents worth. I don't know who to throw it to next, but I think class is over.
So I would like to make sure we complete who's here. Like if there are folks within this circle who still want to speak, like to close it. So Caitlin, pass it to someone. And then if you want to jump out of the circle, let me know in the chat so we can consolidate this. So go ahead, Caitlin, pass it to somebody.
I'll pass it back to Serene, I guess, because you had some really interesting thoughts on was it Carla's response?
Oh my God, I like don't want to take up more time. I feel like all I do is talk. I'll pass it to, wait, is Glenn still here? Yeah, I see you. You're there. Hi. Do you want to go?
Is it me? You're looking for it? Okay, thank you everyone for those. It's a lot of thinking to do. With what Carla mentioning about Monica about intergenerational dialogue, very timely for what I am facing today. I was recently in a bunch of sessions catered for the youth, and older folks spoke a lot of time about how we shouldn't really let age and generations divide us, and how it's part of exclusion and inclusion. But there was no space for the youth to respond. So it was just a lot of talking down to, like, don't do this, but we can do it. So it's just like, it is a, like Carla said, you have to think about what can you give, what are your capacity at this moment. And it's a lot of performance, like it's so much performance that you really have to do, and that is part of activism. You sometimes you have to, like, perform, not in a sense that it has to be not true to who you are, but there's just spaces where you have to find a way where you're not giving off too much, but also retaining who you are. Also, with what Serene is saying, sometimes for me it's, and like what I think it was also Carla who said, and what inspired me to think about it is, like, not all skin folk is kinfolk, and sometimes it's not always the people that look like you that will be your allies. So you also have opportunities for support and care in other communities. And I found myself with a lack of what everyone has echoed, like there's a lot of Filipino studies at UFT too. It's a very violent school in a sense of, in a more than physical sense. So I've had to create my own spaces as well. And so a lot of the times when you're entering spaces that you feel like that is not your, communities that are not your own, you have to sit in discomfort. And that's a fact. It will always be uncomfortable. You'll always feel discomfort, but if you're not feeling discomfort, then you're not doing the work. You're not internalizing what they are saying, because us as Filipinos, we hold so many privileges. And I'm thinking about what Jovi Gallet, who's the creator of Pinay Collection, has said, for us to think about reclaiming, for Filipinos to think about reclaiming our identities, so holds a lot of privileges. And I really hold a lot of those privileges. So I had to sit in a lot of discomfort in classes that talk about, Black liberation and queer studies and the Palestinian issue. I have to hold myself accountable to the ways that I hold privileges and think about that discomfort, because it won't really be any learning if you're not feeling that discomfort. And sometimes for me, the biggest thing is also just sitting in silence. Sometimes I'm just marinating in all the information. It's not that you're not being a leader. Being an effective leader is also being able to listen, and because you don't always have to take up space, right? Like, you are being a leader by listening to everyone, because not everyone can speak at the same time. And so for you to create that space of being able to be an active listener, that is being a leader as well. So yeah, those are just thoughts. Like, those are ways that you can intervene by also listening, finding ways that are, what are your capacities, and just sitting in that discomfort, because we don't have all the answers sometimes. Some of the other person do. So yeah, and I don't know who hasn't gone yet, but I am gonna pass it to Chloe, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, that was really I was thinking of very similar things when, like, in terms of, I've always wrestled with this wanting to carve out space, but also not take up too much space. Like there's that dance between listening but also leading as well. And I think you put it really nicely when you were saying that when you are listening, you are still leading, or you are still empowering yourself or others. And I think that discomfort too, everyone's comments made me think of this one situation where I was on the student, the Anthropology Student Association, and we're all students. We were part of this student hiring committee, which was a pretty tenuous situation in terms of like, it was the Indigenous student hiring committee. So like they were hiring an Indigenous scholar, but there's the like authority of the profs who like are kind of like looking down on us in terms of like, okay, these are students, like we want to hear their opinion, but like not really kind of thing. But then there was also like within the student association, there was also another dynamic of like, certain like racialized students and like white members of the student association who would like take up a lot of space too. And I remember like being on that committee and like, you know, we were talking about like how Indigenous students can like have a mentor within our department, and this like white student was just like, she was taking up so much space, kind of like in line with what Serene was like, white, bossy white feminist, like she was just, what she was saying was good, but it was just, she spoke for I think like 30 minutes. And I was just like sitting there like, oh my God, like, yes, what you're like, I agree with what you're saying, but you're just like so aggressive and taking so much space. Like it was like kind of like, it was aggressing me. Like I just like had to tune out. Like I couldn't take it, you know? So like, there are moments where like the silence is there and like it's kind of like purposeful, which doesn't mean that you're like not like I don't know, like you're not empowered either, or like you're not leading. There are just moments where like, yeah, like being mindful of how much space you're taking up. Like it was a reminder to me that like, okay, if I can feel discomforted by someone who's like taking up so much space and being so aggressive, like I need to also check myself and remind myself that like I don't want to be like taking up so much space like this person. So yeah. I don't know do we have more time? Should we?
So those who gotta go, I think, are leaving. I would just pose it. People can pass, right, once you do it. So let's just make sure those who are still here, who, if they want to speak, they can. So send it some way, Chloe.
I'll pass it to Anne if she's still here. If she wants to make any more comments.
I'll pass. I'm just here to listen right now. Thank you though. Should I pass it to someone else? I guess out of maybe Gino, if Gino would like to talk.
Yeah, thank you. So with everybody's like, you know, brilliant answers, it really made me think about some of the good things that comes out with student leadership too. I really got involved with so much community events because of joining, you know, student leadership related activities. I made so many great friends, you know, lifelong friends. I met Glenn, I met Carla, Monica, and you know, Hillary through all these leadership activities. And you know, by I just want to like I guess like emphasize that these people also like help me bring out the best in me, not just with, you know, leadership, but also at the same time with like my personal life and like careers and all of that. So yeah, I like just want to like wrap it up. Like my point, wrap it up, is that despite all the discomfort and, you know, challenges that we face, you know, taking up space as student leaders, there's always so much joy to that that comes with it. There's always a bright side, and I always see that bright side as a challenge for me to kind of like, you know, be better and to challenge myself more to, you know, to take up more space when needed. And, you know, kind of like also they help me to stay grounded as well, and kind of like always remember that, you know, I do all of this because I love my community and I love being a part of this community. And that just inspired me to do more work. And now working as a group mentoring lead at the Tri Mentoring program at Ryerson, I kind of like my love for my entire team kind of reflected on that, because, you know, I treat my you know, other, like I treat other leaders that I treat other people as if they were leaders too. Like everybody's a leader. Everybody has their own way to kind of like reflect that in their work. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Yeah. Should I pass it on to somebody else or yeah? I think I'm passing it to Brianna. Where did she go already?
Hi, y'all. I don't
Hi.
have much to say. I really enjoyed everyone's contributions, but yeah, should I just pass it or okay? Um, is Carla here?
Yes, but I'm done talking. So,